Victor didn't sit down. He came in fast. Jacket still on. The sound of the door closing behind him sharper than usual. I knew that sound. After 15 years, I could tell his mood by the way the lock turned. This one meant trouble. "Elena?" he said. Not loud. Controlled. That was worse. He dropped a thick folder on the kitchen table. It hit the surface hard enough to slide my mug an inch to the side. Papers spilled out, loan agreements. Printed emails. Copies of IDs. Transaction summaries with numbers circled in red ink. 270,000, he said. I didn't ask what he was talking about. I already knew it had something to do with his mother. It always did. Margaret Moore had a talent for turning her mistakes into other people's obligations. She invested with the wrong people. Victor continued. High-yield cooperative. Real estate backed. That's what they told her. End quote. End quote. I looked down at the papers. Promissory notes. Interest schedules. One document had the word default stamped across the top in block letters. How much? I asked. He exhaled through his nose. Irritated that I was making him repeat himself. With penalties. It's at 270. And it's increasing daily. End quote. Said. I stood there. One hand on the counter. The other still wet from washing green beans. The kitchen clock ticked steadily above the stove. Everything felt ordinary. That was the unsettling part. Tomorrow morning, Victor said. You're going to the bank. I think 7 of little down. I looked up at him. You'll withdraw the funds. I have not, Mins. What funds? I asked. He finally met my eyes. There was something there I hadn't seen in a long time. Not anger. Fear. Your mother's house money, he said. The inheritance. 68,000. Minimum. Plus whatever jewelry you've been hiding? It's not. I felt my chest tighten. But my face stayed still. I told you, I said calmly, that money is for emergencies. If great for do-it peas of Ard, this is an emergency. It's a realtor. No, I said. This is your mother's debt. Menaced, the silence that followed was deliberate. Victor was very good with silence. He used it like pressure. Waiting for people to fill it with compliance. You'll also apply for a loan, he added. Or borrow. Or sell something. I don't care how you do it. End quote. That still won't be enough, I said. He stepped closer. Not touching me. He didn't need to. By tomorrow evening? He said. The full amount needs to be transferred. $270,000. And quote. And if I don't? I asked. The words came out before I could stop them. Or maybe I didn't want to stop them. Victor froze. His jaw tightened. His face darkened. Slowly. Like something overheating. Then you'll regret it, he said quietly. You'll regret ever being born. Adeninder. He leaned in just enough for me to smell his cologne. And don't think about leaving, he added. I'll find you. You have children. Don't forget that. Inexperience. He turned and walked out of the kitchen, leaving the papers spread across the table like evidence. I stood there for a full minute after he left. Not shaking. Not crying. Just breathing. I looked down at the documents again. Margaret's signature was on all of them. Confident. Looping. The handwriting of a woman who had never doubted her authority. For 15 years, she had audited my grocery receipts, questioned every purchase, reminded me daily that I lived in her apartment out of generosity, not obligation. And now she owed $270,000 to people who did not negotiate. That night, Victor slept soundly. I didn't. I lay on my side of the bed. staring at the dark outline of the closet door, listening to his breathing. I thought about who I had been before this house, before this marriage. At 24, I had been an engineer. Not brilliant, but solid, careful, employed. I had plans. Margaret used to call that period of my life a phase. End quote. By morning, something inside me had settled. Not anger, not panic, clarity. At 7:30 a.m., Victor put on his shoes and grabbed his keys. "I expect the transfer confirmation tonight," he said, not looking at me. "Don't make me repeat myself. If you wed," I nodded. That was what I had always done. The door closed. 6 hours later, my children and I were sitting on a plane, but before that, there were details. Quiet, precise steps. I waited 5 minutes after Victor left, then went to the closet and pulled out the prepaid phone I'd hidden years ago, wrapped in an old scarf. I hadn't turned it on in months. I dialed one number. "Renee," I said when she picked up. "I need you to listen. Don't interrupt. It's not medic." She didn't. When I finished, there was a pause. "If you stay," she said finally, "this won't end well." End quote. "A great man," end quote. "I know," I said. "Then come now." 2. Danger. By noon, I had booked 3 one-way tickets. I packed only what we could carry. Documents, medication, clothes for a week, things that mattered. Lucas watched me carefully. He was 16, old enough to understand silence. "We're not coming back." "Are we?" he asked. "No," I said. Maya clutched her stuffed rabbit. "Is Daddy mad?" "Daddy will be busy," I said. At 5 o'clock. We left the apartment. Before we did, I went back into the kitchen. The table was clean now. I stacked the papers neatly, slid them back into the folder, and placed an envelope on top. I had written and torn up several notes. Explanations. Arguments. None of them felt necessary. In the end, I wrote 7 words. Short. Accurate. Then I turned off the lights and closed the door. As the plane taxied down the runway, I felt something unfamiliar. It wasn't relief. It was space. That evening, Victor would come home early. He always did when he was anxious. He would call my name, check the bedroom, the closets. Margaret would arrive soon after, using her spare key. Already yelling. She would find the envelope. She would read it. And for the first time in 15 years, I would not be there to explain myself. Before this unfolds, if stories about quiet strength and hard choices stay with you, leave a like and subscribe. Gently. So these stories keep finding their way to you. And tell me, what city are you listening from tonight? Now let me take you back to the moment just before everything cracked, when I still thought silence was safety, and home hadn't yet become a threat. People often imagine control as something loud. Raised voices, slammed doors, bruises you can point to. That wasn't my marriage. Victor didn't need to shout. Margaret didn't need to threaten. Their system worked better without noise. It began small. It always does. After the wedding, Margaret insisted we move into her apartment, temporarily. She said it made financial sense. 3 bedrooms. Plenty of space. Rent-free. Just until we saved enough. That temporary arrangement lasted 15 years. At first, I was still working. I left the house every morning with my laptop bag and came back tired but satisfied. I paid part of the utilities. I bought groceries. I felt like an adult. Margaret didn't like that. She never said it directly. She preferred implications. Concern. Advice delivered as facts. A married woman doesn't need to exhaust herself like this. Very 44 minutes to the Papless 4044. Victor earns enough. 18. A mother's place is at home. It's not expanded. When I got pregnant with Lucas, the decision was made for me. Not discussed. Announced. Why rush back to work? Margaret said. You'll miss everything important. End quote. End quote. Victor agreed. He always did. So I stayed home. At first, I told myself it was temporary. Just until the baby was older. Just until things stabilized. They never did. Money became structured, organized, controlled. Victor handed me a weekly amount in cash. Not unreasonable, he said. More than enough, he said. As long as I planned properly. Margaret required receipts. All of them. She reviewed grocery lists like audit reports. Too much fruit. Name brand cereal. Why did you need 2 cleaning products instead of 1? When I objected, she smiled. If you have nothing to hide, why be defensive? Victor adopted the same language. Just be transparent. Dan, don't make this a problem. If new stub you want problem, over time. I stopped arguing. It wasn't worth the hours of tension that followed. Silence was easier. When Maya was born, I tried again. I want to do something part-time, I said one evening. Remote. Consulting. I still have my certifications. End quote. Margaret didn't even look up from her crossword puzzle. And who will raise the children? She asked. Victor sighed, as if I had exhausted him. Why are you creating stress? He said. We're doing fine. End quote. That phrase became a boundary. Any attempt at independence crossed it. My documents disappeared slowly. First my passport. Margaret said she put it somewhere safe. Then my birth certificate. My diplomas. Victor said it was better if everything important was in one place. I knew where that place was. I also knew asking for them back would start something I didn't have the energy to finish. So I adapted. I learned to memorize numbers instead of writing them down. I learned to hide small amounts of cash inside winter coats. I learned to open a bank account online under my maiden name and never check it from our home network. That money, my mother's inheritance, was the first thing that was truly mine in years. I didn't touch it. I didn't grow it. I let it sit. Not as an escape plan. As insurance. Margaret sensed it anyway. She always did. You've changed, she told me once, narrowing her eyes across the kitchen table. You're secretive. After 7 Dodd, I smiled and poured her tea. Victor changed too. He became sharper, more efficient, less patient. He monitored my phone usage, questioned unfamiliar numbers. Once, he asked why I needed a smartphone at all. You don't work, he said. Who are you calling? I stopped explaining. The children noticed long before I thought they did. Lucas learned to speak quietly, to draw in his room with the door closed. Victor didn't like his sketches, said they were pointless. Maya learned to apologize for things she hadn't done, for spilling water, for breathing too loudly, for existing in the wrong moment. One evening, after Victor criticized her for laughing during dinner, she looked at me with wide eyes and whispered, I'll be good. It's now it. That was when something inside me cracked. Not loudly. Just enough to let the truth in. This wasn't discipline. It was conditioning. By the time Victor threw the folder on the table and demanded $270,000, the system was complete. Margaret had invested recklessly. But she hadn't done it alone. She had recruited, persuaded, collected referral bonuses. She believed rules were for other people. Victor knew more than he admitted. His business moved cash in ways I never asked about. Repairs paid in envelopes. Clients without invoices. I saw the patterns. I said nothing. Silence was survival. But that night, when he told me I would regret being born if I refused, the balance shifted. Control depends on belief. Belief that you have no options. Belief that resistance costs more than obedience. Lying in bed beside him, listening to his steady breathing, I understood something clearly for the first time. They didn't need me because they loved me. They needed me because I was useful. The money, the children, the appearance of stability, and when usefulness ended, so would tolerance. That was the moment fear lost its grip. Not because it disappeared, because it was finally outweighed by something else. Resolve. By morning, I was calm, not brave. Calm. That was new. I moved through the day carefully, purposefully. I smiled when spoken to. I answered questions without volunteering information. I didn't confront. I didn't warn. People who rely on control rarely see departure coming. They mistake silence for submission. They confuse stillness with weakness. I packed because it was necessary. I left because it was overdue. And for the first time in 15 years, my decisions were not a reaction. They were deliberate. The folder stayed on the kitchen table all night. Victor hadn't bothered to put it away. He never did when he wanted something. Leaving things out was part of the pressure. A reminder that the problem existed, that it was waiting, that it would be my responsibility by morning. I made breakfast as usual. Eggs, toast, coffee for Margaret. Exactly 2 teaspoons of sugar. She read the paper without looking at me. Victor ate quickly. Already late for work. He didn't mention the money again. He didn't need to. The demand had been delivered. Repetition was unnecessary. After they left, I sat down and opened the folder. This time, I read everything. Promissory notes, private lending agreements, interest schedules that compounded weekly. One document referenced a default escalation clause. Another included a list of assets pledged as collateral. Margaret's apartment was on that list. So was Victor's business equipment. And, in smaller print, future income streams. That was when I understood why Victor was afraid. This wasn't just about his mother. This was about him. Margaret had not only invested her savings, she had borrowed. Aggressively. From people who documented everything and forgave nothing. One name appeared repeatedly in the correspondence. A lender known for fast cash and faster consequences. I didn't need to Google him to understand the type. I checked the dates. The earliest loan had been taken out almost 2 years earlier. 2 years. All that time. They had said nothing. They had continued to monitor my spending. Continued to question every grocery item. Continued to lecture me about financial responsibility. The irony was precise. I flipped to the last page. A notice of demand. 24 hours to cure the default. After that, enforcement actions. That was the evening Victor wanted the money. I closed the folder. For the first time, I wasn't looking at it as a wife or a daughter-in-law. I was looking at it as a liability, and I was not liable. The inheritance from my mother was legally mine. Separate property. I had never commingled it, never transferred it, never signed anything. Victor knew that. That was why he threatened me, instead of asking. Around noon, my phone buzzed. A message from Victor. "Have you been to the bank yet?" I didn't reply. 10 minutes later. Another message. "This isn't optional." I put the phone face down on the counter and continued packing a small suitcase. I didn't rush. Rushing makes mistakes. By mid-afternoon, Margaret called. "Elena," she said, her voice unusually controlled. "Victor tells me you're being difficult. It's stated andibles. I'm reading the documents." I replied. "There's nothing to read." She snapped. "The situation is simple." End quote. Activize Khan. "It is." I agreed. She paused. She wasn't used to agreement without compliance. "You understand what happens if these people don't get their money," she said. "I understand what happens when adults sign contracts," I replied. Her breath caught slightly. That was new. "You live in my apartment," she said sharply. "You and those children." End quote. "Yes," I said. "And this debt is still yours." End quote. The line went silent. When she spoke again, her tone had shifted. Softer. Persuasive. "Family helps family," she said. "I would do the same for you." End quote. I didn't answer immediately. That sentence had been used for 15 years. Always in one direction. "Margaret," I said calmly, "you audited my grocery receipts for a decade. You didn't help. You supervised. It is now." Her voice hardened. "If you don't do this," she said, "you'll destroy everything." That, in France, I ended the call. At 4:30, Victor called again. This time, he didn't bother with pretense. "I know you have the money," he said. "Don't pretend otherwise." End quote. "I have some money," I replied. "Not your money. It is not so. You're my wife." End quote. "That doesn't make me your bank." "It is everyone," he laughed once. Short. Humorless. "You think this is about fairness?" he asked. "You think the law is going to protect you?" "I think the law is very clear," I said. "You're not a lawyer," he snapped. "No," I said. "But I know what I didn't sign." Very Miles. Silence. Then his voice dropped. "You walk away from this," he said slowly, "and I will make sure you lose the children." End quote. That was the moment everything became simple. Threats change the nature of a conversation. They remove ambiguity. They clarify intent. "I'm documenting this call," I said. "What?" he asked. "I'm documenting this call," I repeated, "along with the financial demand and the threat." End quote. "You think you're clever?" he said. "I think you should stop talking," I replied. I ended the call. I sat at the table for a moment, hands folded, breathing evenly. I wasn't shaking. I wasn't panicking. I was done negotiating. The folder went back on the table, exactly where Victor had left it. On top, I placed a single sheet of paper with a handwritten note. "The debt is not mine." That was it. No emotion. No explanation. By 5 o'clock, the suitcases were by the door. Lucas stood nearby, watching me carefully. "They're scared," he said quietly. "Who?" I asked. "Dad and Grandma," he replied. "They don't yell when they're not scared." I have endures. I looked at my son, at the way he said it like an observation, not an accusation. "You're right," I said. Maya hugged my leg. "Are we in trouble?" she asked. "No," I said. "We're leaving it." When we stepped out of the apartment, I didn't look back. Control relies on proximity. Distance breaks it. As the elevator doors closed, my phone buzzed again. Another message from Victor. "You'll regret this." I deleted it. Regret was what I had been living with. What I felt now was clarity. The hardest part wasn't leaving. It was the night before. That night, After the folder had been opened, after the calls had ended, after the threats had been delivered and logged in my memory with precise timestamps, I lay awake beside Victor and let the noise in my head finally go quiet. Not because the situation was resolved, because my decision was, there is a difference. Victor slept easily. He always did when he believed control was intact. His breathing was slow, confident, uninterrupted by doubt. I watched the ceiling fan rotate in measured circles and thought about the first apartment we shared after we married. A studio with bad lighting and a radiator that knocked all night. I had been happy there. Poor, but independent. Margaret had hated that place. She visited once and spent the entire evening pointing out flaws. Thin walls. Unsafe neighborhood. No room for children. She said nothing positive. 2 weeks later, she suggested we move in with her. I remembered how reasonable it sounded at the time. Temporary. Practical. Smart. Most traps don't look like traps. They look like solutions. Around 2 a.m, Victor shifted and muttered something in his sleep. I waited until his breathing settled again. Then got out of bed quietly and went to the living room. The apartment was dark. Familiar. Too familiar. Every object had a history of approval or criticism attached to it. The sofa Margaret had chosen. The rug she complained about but never replaced. The cabinet she kept locked. Where she stored documents she said were important. I didn't open it. I had learned long ago that confrontation without leverage was pointless. I sat at the kitchen table and opened my notebook. The same one I used to keep grocery lists and school reminders. On the first blank page, I wrote down everything I could remember. Dates. Amounts. Exact phrases. Transfer the funds by tomorrow evening. I'm Ward. You'll regret being born. This manneted under faces. I'll take the kids. Airy. I wrote without commentary. No adjectives. No emotional framing. Facts don't need decoration. This wasn't a diary entry. It was a record. By the time I finished, my hand was steady. The page looked clean. Almost professional. That was when I realized something else. If I stayed, this would escalate. Not because they were evil, because they were cornered. People who lose control don't suddenly become reasonable. They become reckless. Victor's business had been a gray area for years. Cash heavy. Light on paperwork. Margaret's investments followed the same pattern. They believed systems existed for other people. Now the system was coming for them, and they needed a buffer. Me. At 4:30, I stood by the window and watched the streetlights flicker. Somewhere. A delivery truck passed. The city was waking up. I felt oddly detached. Not numb. Focused. By morning, I moved through the house like a guest. Polite. Efficient. Margaret complained that her toast was cold. Victor complained that his shirt hadn't been pressed properly. I apologized. Habit. Not guilt. When Victor left for work, he kissed Maya on the head and told her to listen to Grandma. He didn't look at me. Margaret waited until the door closed. You have until tonight, she said, folding her arms. After that, I can't protect you. End quote. Protect me. I looked at her. Really looked. Her hair was perfectly styled. Her posture rigid. Her eyes sharp but tired. For the first time, I saw fear there too. You never protected me, I said evenly. You managed me? End quote. End quote. She laughed. Sharp and dismissive. You'd be nothing without us, she said. That sentence had power once. It didn't anymore. I spent the day preparing in small, precise ways. I copied documents onto a flash drive. Birth certificates. Medical records. School transcripts. I photographed the folder of debts page by page. I backed everything up to cloud storage from a public network. I disabled location services on my phone. I paid cash for the prepaid phone and left it powered off in my bag. At noon, Victor texted again. Last chance. I didn't respond. At 1. Margaret slammed cabinets loudly, making sure I heard her. At 2. She called Victor and spoke in urgent whispers. At 3. She confronted me in the hallway. You think you can just disappear? She demanded. Yes, I said. Her eyes widened. She wasn't prepared for certainty. You don't have anywhere to go. Adersplayed. I have enough, I replied. She raised her voice for the first time in years. You're ungrateful, she said. After everything I've done for you. 8 minus dead Mattery. I held her gaze. You controlled my life for 15 years, I said. That wasn't generosity. Reveling, she stared at me as if seeing a stranger. In a way, she was. By 5 o'clock, the apartment felt different. Lighter, as if it already belonged to someone else. Lucas and Maya sat on the couch with their backpacks at their feet. They didn't ask questions. Children know when something is finally over. Before we left, I went back into the kitchen. The folder was still there. I placed the envelope on top. This time, I didn't hesitate. The note inside was brief. 7 words. No emotion. The debt is yours. Pay it yourself. I set it down carefully, aligning it with the edge of the table. Then I turned off the lights. When the door closed behind us, I felt something settle fully into place. Not relief. Ownership. Of my decision. Of my silence. Of my future. I didn't know what would happen next. I only knew I would not be there to absorb it. Once the decision was final, time became structured. I didn't feel rushed. I felt scheduled. 10 hours. That was what I had before Victor would return home earlier than usual. Expecting a bank receipt and a submission that would confirm his authority was intact. I had no intention of being there. The first step was distance digital. Physical. Administrative. At 7:45 a.m., I left the apartment with the children, as if it were a normal school day. Margaret watched from the window. I waved. She waved back. Already rehearsing her next lecture. We didn't go to school. We went downtown. The mobile store was crowded and impersonal. Exactly what I wanted. I chose the simplest phone available. No data plan. No GPS. Cash payment. The clerk tried to upsell me. I declined. He shrugged and moved on. Anonymity is underrated. From there, we went to the bank. Not our usual branch. A larger one near the business district. I withdrew a modest amount in cash. Not enough to trigger anything. The teller glanced at the screen. Then at me. Everything okay today? She asked. Yes, I said. Just traveling. 80. She smiled and handed me the envelope. That was it. No alarms. No warnings. Systems don't flag quiet exits. We ate lunch at a small diner. I ordered grilled cheese for Maya and a turkey sandwich for Lucas. They ate without complaining. Are we going to Renee's? Lucas asked. Yes, I said. For good, yes. And Ford, he nodded and finished his sandwich. At 1:30, I booked the ride to the airport from a new account. Linked to the prepaid phone number. No saved addresses. No history. At 2, I went back to the apartment alone. Margaret was out. I could tell by the absence of commentary. I packed what remained. Not memories, not furniture. Only essentials. I left behind clothes I had worn for years and books I had never been allowed to keep on shared shelves. I took documents. Photographs of my mother. A small box of jewelry that had no resale value but carried history. Victor's early gifts. From before Margaret moved in. From before Control had a system. At 3. I wiped down surfaces. Habit. Courtesy. Conditioning. Then I stopped. I didn't know cleanliness. At 4, the children and I sat in the living room, waiting. The television was on. No one watched it. "Mama," Maya said quietly. "Will Grandma be mad?" "Yes," I said. "Will Daddy yell?" "Yes," I said. She considered that. "Will he yell at us?" "No," I said. That mattered. At 5. We left. The driver loaded our suitcases into the trunk and glanced at the building. "Long trip?" he asked. "One way," I said. He nodded. Didn't ask more. People rarely do when they sense finality. As the car pulled away, I looked at the apartment one last time, not with nostalgia, with assessment. It was a container. Nothing more. At the airport. Everything moved quickly. Security. Boarding passes. Lines. I kept my posture relaxed. Shoulders down. Voice steady. Panic attracts attention. We boarded with Group C. Maya took the middle seat. Lucas, by the window. I sat on the aisle. Blocking access. When the doors closed, I turned off both phones. The old one and the new one. Silence is a boundary. As the plane taxied, my mind replayed the sequence I wouldn't witness. Victor returning early. The lights off. The quiet. Margaret arriving with her key. Already angry. The envelope. I knew she would open it first. She always did. She never respected privacy. She called it concern. She would read the note. 7 words. No emotion. She would scream. Not because of the debt. Because Control had slipped. The plane lifted. Maya squeezed my hand. "Are you scared?" she asked. "Yes," I said. "A little. It's contact videos." "Me too," she said. "But it's a good scared." End quote. I understood. Fear without humiliation feels different. It doesn't shrink you. It opens space. When we landed, Renee was waiting near baggage claim. Same smile. Same posture. Different context. She hugged me first. Then, the children. "You're safe," she said. "Not everything will be fine. It's Stoner's, no wire. Safe was enough." In the car, she talked about traffic and weather and nothing important. She knew better than to ask questions immediately. That night, after the children fell asleep on borrowed blankets, I stepped onto the balcony of Renee's apartment. The air smelled different. Saltier. Lighter. I turned on the prepaid phone. 23 missed calls from Victor. 8 from Margaret. 3 from Victor's sister. I didn't listen to the messages. I didn't need to. I turned the phone off and set it face down on the table. For the first time in 15 years, no one knew where I was. That wasn't fear. That was freedom. In its earliest form. Renee's apartment was small. 2 bedrooms. 3rd floor. No elevator. A narrow balcony that looked out over another building and, if you leaned far enough to the side, a thin strip of water beyond the rooftops. It wasn't impressive. It was quiet. That was the first thing Maya noticed. "No one's yelling." She said that first night, her voice almost unsure, as if she expected correction. "No," I replied. No one is. And have a great winter. Renee's husband. Mark nodded once from the kitchen. He was a large man with tired eyes and hands rough from construction work. He didn't ask questions. He didn't offer opinions. He made space. That was enough. The first night, I didn't sleep much. Not because of fear, but because my body was waiting for interruption, for footsteps, for voices in the hallway, for Margaret's key in the lock. None came. At 3 a.m, I stepped onto the balcony alone. The air was warm and heavy, filled with unfamiliar sounds. Insects, distant traffic, the ocean somewhere beyond my line of sight. I turned on my phone. Missed calls. Messages. Voicemails queued up like evidence. I didn't open them. Documentation is only useful when you need it. For now, distance was leverage. Renee joined me with 2 mugs of tea. First night is the worst, she said. Your system doesn't know it's over yet. When after 7 dull, she was right. In the morning, Mark made pancakes. A stack of them. Too many. Lucas ate 3 without being told to slow down. Maya poured syrup without apologizing. No one commented. That was new. After breakfast, Renee handed me a set of keys. You can stay as long as you need, she said. We'll figure out the rest. It's no vrtwelvning. I didn't argue. I had learned that accepting help without negotiation was not weakness. It was efficiency. By the second day, I started moving again. I found a small studio apartment 30 minutes away by foot. Old building. Thin walls. A kitchen that barely qualified as one. It was affordable. It was mine. We moved in with borrowed furniture and donated dishes. A fold-out sofa with a broken spring. A table that wobbled if you leaned on it. Lucas tightened the screws without being asked. Maya arranged her few things carefully, lining up her books and setting her stuffed rabbit on the pillow. Can we stay here forever? She asked. For now, I said. That's enough. I have a 9. I started looking for work immediately. The gap on my resume was a problem. 15 years is not a sabbatical. It's an erasure. I sent applications anyway. Quality assurance. Lab technician. Dispatcher. Anything that required precision. Systems thinking. Accountability. I told the truth when asked. Stay-at-home mother. Family obligations. No explanations beyond that. In the meantime, I used what I had. I crocheted. I posted photos of light summer pieces online. Simple tops. Hats. Scarves. Practical things. 3 orders came in the first week. It wasn't much. It was movement. Lucas asked about art classes. A community center offered evening sessions for teens. He asked carefully. Like someone expecting no. Yes, I said immediately. Maya came home from her first day of school surprised. My teacher didn't yell, she said. Even when someone spilled water. Tincture, I remembered that once a week. I turned on my phone. The missed calls piled up. Victor's messages shifted. First, threats. Then demands. Then bargaining. Think about the kids. Come back and we'll talk. This is getting out of hand. Margaret's messages never changed. Thief. Ungrateful. I'll find you. I saved everything. Screenshots. Dates. Times. Not for revenge. For record. 2 weeks later. I changed my number. The silence felt like a door closing. A month after that. An unknown number called. Area code from the city we left. My name is Clara. The woman said. I was married to Victor before you. The 70-24 and we talked for 2 hours. Her story matched mine. The charm. The control. Margaret's presence. The restrictions. She had left with nothing. Lost in court. Branded unstable. "This wasn't your fault," she said. "It's a system. She builds it. He enforces it." End quote. When the call ended, I sat in the dark. Not shocked. Validated. 3 months later, Detective Hall called. Calm. Precise. Victor's business wasn't clean. Margaret wasn't just a victim. "There are cash flows that don't align with reported income," he said. "And evidence your mother-in-law recruited investors herself." So she participated. I said, "Yes." Actually brazen, he asked about finances. Documents. Employment restrictions. "No shouting," I said. "Just limits. It's tweeted daughters, enforced how? Through access. Money. Information. Abi say, that's coercive control." He said, "I wasn't a suspect. I was a witness." 2 weeks later, Victor was arrested at his office. Margaret suffered a stress-induced heart attack the same day. She survived. Victor was held without bail. Fraud. Money laundering. Tax evasion. Margaret received a suspended sentence and asset seizure. When resources disappear, control collapses. Victor requested to see me. I agreed. "On my terms," he explained. Deflected. Bargained. "If you help me," he said, "I'll make sure the divorce is clean." 10. "I already have the kids," I said. "And this isn't a negotiation. It's Frand. You'll fail without me," he said. "For 15 years," I replied. "You told me I was nothing, and yet I'm the one who left." When Herr the Dact advanced at trial, I testified to facts only. When asked why I stayed so long, I answered honestly. Because I confused endurance with responsibility. Olivest, Victor was convicted on all counts. 6 years. Asset forfeiture. Permanent bans. Life didn't transform overnight. It stabilized. I took an entry-level job in quality assurance. The pay was modest. The routine was clean. Rent paid on time. Groceries without scrutiny. No one checked receipts. Lucas changed first. His shoulders relaxed. He stopped flinching. He won second place in a citywide art contest and showed me without apology. Maya slept through the night. Raised her hand in class. "Confidence isn't disrespect," she told me. A year later, I bought the studio apartment next door. Small. Quiet. Mine. That night, the ocean was steady outside the balcony. I wrote that freedom isn't loud. It doesn't announce itself. It shows up as calm, as choice, as space where fear used to live. Sometimes women reach out. I don't advise. I listen. Sometimes. That was enough. 3 years after I left, Lucas moved to another city for college. Art school. Partial scholarship. He called every Sunday without fail. Maya started talking about marine biology after a school trip to the aquarium. Her walls filled with posters of sea life. She spoke about the future without hesitation. I didn't push. I watched. One evening, sitting on the balcony, Renee brought wine and news. Another woman called. She said your story helped her leave. It's not 7. I nodded. I didn't feel heroic. I felt useful. And that was enough. 5 years passed without announcement. Time didn't close the story. It clarified it. By then, routines had hardened into stability. Not the fragile kind that depends on cooperation from the wrong people, but the solid kind built on ownership and boundaries. Lucas was finishing his final year of art school. He called to tell me about a small solo exhibition the department was hosting. Nothing extravagant. A white room. Proper lighting. His name printed cleanly on a program. "I want you there," he said. "I'll be there," I replied. Maya was 19. Focused. Methodical. She studied marine biology and spoke about dolphins with the seriousness of someone who intended to be useful. Not admired. One evening, she asked, "Do you think people can change?" I considered the question before answering. "I think people can understand themselves better." I said, "Change is what they do with that understanding." "Anyone," she nodded. Satisfied. I hadn't heard Victor's name in months when the letter arrived. A plain envelope. Correctional facility return address. Handwriting tighter than I remembered. He didn't ask for forgiveness. He didn't blame anyone. He wrote about therapy. About silence. About realizing how much of his identity had been built on control rather than competence. He asked about the children. Carefully. Without entitlement. I read the letter twice. Then I placed it back in the envelope and locked it in a drawer. Some things don't require response. Not because they don't matter. Because responding would reopen a channel that no longer served a purpose. Margaret passed away quietly in a state facility. Social services handled the arrangements. No one called me. I found out months later through a public notice. I felt nothing dramatic. Only distance. That system of control had outlived its authority long before it outlived its architect. On a spring evening, I walked alone along the waterfront. The air was warm. The water steady. The city behind me alive but irrelevant. I thought about the moment this story began. Not the demand. Not the folder. But the realization that I was being treated as a resource, not a person. That understanding had cost $270,000 they never got. It gave me something they never could take. I didn't escape with help from the law. The law followed later. I didn't leave because I was brave. I left because staying had become illogical. Freedom, I learned, isn't dramatic. It's practical. It's knowing where your documents are. It's reading contracts before signing. It's silence that no longer feels heavy. If you're listening to this and recognizing pieces of your own life in it, know this. You don't need permission to leave. You need clarity. And clarity comes faster than you think once you stop explaining yourself.